I'm Scott Wallace. Rain-laden clouds dumped more than 5 inches of moisture on area water supplies. Now you might think that much rain would immediately end water rationing in the metro area. Not necessarily so. Last night's deluge will have no effect on the city of Norman's odd-even rationing plan. Norman's problem is not a lack of water, but rather a lack of sufficient water treatment facilities. So Norman residents will only be allowed to water between midnight and 7 a.m. on alternate days. Likewise, the rain will have no immediate effect on Nichols Hills' mandatory rationing plan. A Nichols Hills spokesman says the town needs rationing to give its water wells a rest. So Nichols Hills residents will be allowed to soak their lawns and shrubs only between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. Piedmont residents will also remain under a mandatory water dispersal program. Piedmont homeowners can do their outside watering only between 10 p.m. and 10 a.m. weekdays. No watering will be allowed on weekends. The moisture helped out dry gardens in Shawnee, but unfortunately the city's water supply didn't catch much runoff, so Shawnee's odd-even 8 a.m. to midnight plan remains in effect. Midwest City is one town which has modified its odd-even rationing program. Now Midwest City residents can perform outside watering chores at any hour on alternate days. The rains will have an indirect beneficial effect on everyone's water supply. Thirsty trees and plants soaked by last night's downpour won't need to be watered for at least a couple of days, and that'll allow cities to stockpile water resources. Scott Wallace, Action 4.
For the past 20 years, Chancellor E.T. Dunlap's been a familiar figure at Oklahoma State Regent meetings. During Dunlap's 2 decades as Chief Executive Officer, money spent for higher education increased from $30 to $470 million. Student population tripled. With all that progress behind him, Chancellor Dunlap today decided to call it quits.
I now feel, Mr. Chairman and Regents and Governor, that it is appropriate that there be a change in the leadership, in the administrative leadership of higher education at the state level, that there be a change in the office of Chancellor. For the good of higher education, for the good of the people, notwithstanding the personal regrets that I may have, I feel that I should retire.
E.T. Dunlap is a unique man because he was able to bring to the higher regents and higher education system the combined experience of a common school educator, a higher education president, and the working knowledge of the legislature, which, as you know from legislative appropriations, plays a great deal with your ability to do better by higher education.
Dunlap says he wants to leave his position as Chancellor no later than December 31st of this year. The search for a replacement is already underway. Mark O'Neill, Action 4 at the state capitol.
Said it's with deep regret. But I want you to know that that's not written by a press secretary, that that's from expertise and experience has provided.
It's easy to see why Father Stan Rother loved Guatemala. The Central American countryside is breathtaking. But Father Rother loved the people who lived here even more. He dedicated the last 13 years of his life easing their desperate poverty with the Word of God. 6 months ago, all that changed. Father Rother's name appeared on the Guatemalan government's death list. He immediately came home to a happy family reunion with his mother and father. During his 3-month visit to Oklahoma, he stopped by to see a friend, Father Marvin Levin.
The government seems to be extremely afraid of any Indian who has a bit of education for fear that they might have a following, and as they have a following, they are suspect of being the rebels. And as a result of this suspicion, he was put on a hit list.
Even though his life was on the line, Father Rother was driven by the need to be with his people. He returned to Guatemala in March. Last night he was shot twice in the front of his church in Santiago Atitlan. The priest's family in Okarche was shocked and angered by the news. They can't understand why a man who worked to help the poor was targeted for execution.
He was Christ to them. He was the living Christ. And so he not only brought the message of Christ, but I think he really was Christ to the people.
One sister told me that taught him, after he did decide to go, after he's out of high school, she said, it's not the smart priests, it's the good priests we need. So I felt very relieved.
I think I've gained a lot by what he has lived. I have learned how to live a deeper life and greater commitment to people. If he could give his life in a foreign country, I can certainly give mine here.
I would like to tell Ronald Reagan that I would buy his plane ticket, and I'd like to take him down there and show him what's going on. And the same thing with Mr. Haig.
Mark O'Neill, Action 4, Okarche.
We're at the office of the C.R. Anthony Company in downtown Oklahoma City, and in walks Public Relations Director Jean Gummerson. Hardly a day goes by that someone doesn't say to her, "You look just like Nancy Reagan." She used to hear that all the time when she traveled to California.
Is Mary Jane there?
But since Nancy Reagan became the First Lady...
All right, thank you, Don.
She hears it all the time. And what's amazing is that the similarities go beyond looks. Jean is a Republican, born and raised in the Midwest, is exactly the same age as Nancy Reagan, and the same dress size. Jean loves designer clothes, and just like the First Lady, Adolfo is one of her favorite designers. She loves to shop and prides herself in wearing a sophisticated look that can take her from her office to social events. And like Nancy Reagan, Jean Gummerson enjoys the finer things in life. She loves beautiful clothes, the arts, and the theater, and she enjoys having lunch with friends.
You have no idea when this is beyond.
At this luncheon, she's discussing the upcoming season of the Oklahoma Theater Center. Much of her work is volunteer. Again, another similarity with Nancy Reagan.
It's been an interesting experience. I think she's a lovely lady, and I'm certainly complimented to even have people think I look like her. And I admire her a lot, so I feel very fortunate.
Perhaps Nancy Reagan should feel fortunate as well. Bella Shaw, Action 4.
First sight, you may think the baseball strike is over, but think again. These are not Yankees and Dodgers, but Democrats and Republicans. And this is last night's Congressional baseball game in Washington. The talk of the game was Ronald Reagan's curveball. Reagan got not just Republicans, but Democrats as well to swing at his 3-year tax cut. Democrats like Oklahoman Dave McCurdy.
I voted with the president on this one. My district overwhelmingly supported him, and I think they wanted to see his economic plan work and hopefully succeed. And I have reservations about the plan, but I think, I voted with the district.
McCurdy was not alone. Oklahoma Democrat Glenn English also voted for the Reagan plan, as did Republican Mickey Edwards. And so the final score showed Ronald Reagan the winner with House approval of his 3-year 25% cut. The Democrats lost not only the tax fight, but also the baseball game, 6-4. Larry Otis, Action 4.
Flags at the state capitol flew at half-mast today by the order of Governor Nye. The governor has declared a period of mourning for the 3 dead lawmen, and state flags will fly at half-mast until they are buried. Why did the plane crash? Al Parker of the Federal Aviation Administration.
Well, of course, there's any number of things could happen. The way the metal is bent on the wing attach points and to the fuselage, and the stabilator system on the rear end of the aircraft indicates that there was a high positive G-load.
The twisted wreckage of the small single-engine Piper was removed by Pittsburgh County Sheriff's officers this afternoon, but not before being combed by drug agents for bullet holes. They didn't find any, so they say. Bullet holes or no bullet holes, the agents did say aircraft will continue to be used in similar searches throughout the state. Tony Stizza, Action 4, southeast of McAlester.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
The Oklahoma Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression rallied at the state capitol this morning to shed some light on how the Reagan budget cuts will affect the poor. The group is concerned that the wave of conservatism spreading through government will destroy much-needed social programs. The leaders of the group want to urge the people they represent to become more active in business and their government.
The reality of the world today that affects Oklahomians, Memphians, New Yorkians, Tokians, Hong Kongians, anywhere in the world, is the economic order is being challenged by those that have been oppressed for over 200 years. It's time that we become business-oriented and learn where the economic order really is.
The Alliance feels that it is only through numbers that they can change policies and opinions that handicap the poor, and that is their job, to draw the numbers. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4, at the state capitol.
How can our elected officials claim
It's quite a change from the organ and choir, but the purpose is the same. Not to entertain, but to unite the congregation in praising God.
It is unusual. It's something, there's been guitar masses before, there's been rock masses, there's been like in Mexico, mariachi masses, things like that. This is something entirely new for North America, for the world, I think, really.
The idea got started 8 years ago in Minneapolis when Father Perkovich got together with Schweck and wrote religious lyrics to some favorite polkas. It's different, but as Father Perkovich says, church music originally came from the people to the church, and this music is from the people. Ted Brown, Action 4 from St. Joseph's Cathedral.
As hundreds of air traffic passengers wait in line, the question is, where can they go, how can they get there, and what about their future traveling plans? For example, take these people from the Putnam City United Methodist Church. They're on their way to Israel. One flight will take them to St. Louis, another to New York. Maybe from there, they'll make it across the ocean. This man from San Francisco had a different problem while he whiled away the hours at Will Rogers World Airport and slept a little. He was more mad at himself than the airlines. He had fallen asleep on a plane and missed his connection.
Well, I was coming from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and I went to sleep on the plane, and I woke up, and they had landed in Oklahoma City.
So in the meantime, the ticket counters have had to deal with individual problems while trying to explain their own problem. And the best advice they could give for people who had reservations was check with your airline for future flights.
Some of the flights are canceled. A lot of them are operating out of here, but a few of the flights are canceled. And I would suggest to the passengers to call the airlines, each individual airlines that they have space booked on, and confirm their flights before coming to the airport.
They say to check with your airlines, yet the lines are always busy. A lot of people are in the same situation you are, but at least a lot of flights are still going. Even though United decided to cancel all flights, a number of major airlines decided to keep the planes moving, even though they have dramatically cut the number of flights in service. But still, the advice of checking with your airline first holds true, since this list could change tomorrow. Bella Shaw, Action 4, at Will Rogers World Airport. This is the Central Purchasing Office at the state capitol, created to lessen the potential for kickback arrangements. Every time an agency or a department spends a lot of money, it has to clear here. Bids are led on construction projects, and it's up to these people to award the lowest and best bid. Accountability is stressed here.
It's first checked through the budget office to make sure the money is encumbered and we have the money to buy it. Then it goes through the regular bid procedure, and the vendors are present at the time the bids are opened.
The people working in this department have nothing to do with the purchases made by county commissioners. So in other words, there are no state records to show what the county commissioners are doing. There would certainly be more checks if the county commissioners' purchases were handled here. This department was audited 5 times during the past year. But the legislature must be prepared to give central purchasing more money if it wants to give it more responsibility. Bella Shaw, Action 4, at the state capitol.
The first signs of economic distress at Will Rogers are taxi cabs. Drivers have to wait a long time before they can get a fare. Wallace Dixon says his income's been cut in half.
Because normally I'd say as a normal day, just if I work out here all day long, I could make anywhere from 8 to 9 trips away, depending on how far I went. And I'll say, for instance, yesterday I only made 4 all day.
TWA Skycaps are also feeling an economic pinch.
Well, as far as gratuities is concerned, naturally it's been light because you don't have the passengers, so you can't have the gratuities.
But it's the airlines who are feeling the most economic pressure. They lose millions of dollars every day the strike goes on.
I would say my boardings this week are down approximately 20 to 25%. And I really know of no reason. We have seats, we're going on time, you know. I'd urge everyone to come to the airport and go somewhere.
Airline pilots say the skies are just as safe now as they were before the strike, but try telling that to passengers. Half-full airplanes are a losing proposition, and Captain Dennis Williams says he's worried.
But as far as safety, there's no problem at all. The people working now are they are supervisors, and the reason they're supervisors is because they were highly qualified to begin with. So we're having no problems in the air. But it's true that over the long haul, if we have a slowdown that cuts back our flights, by a large percentage over a long period of time, sure, it's going to have a devastating effect on the whole industry. So we are worried about that, no doubt.
Everyone we talked to was optimistic about their future. Most felt certain the strike would be settled soon. Their economic livelihoods would return to normal. Mark O'Neill, Action 4, Will Rogers World Airport.
The members of PATCO and their families are not giving up hope as they gather daily to discuss their fate. Striking and now fired air traffic controllers say they have no intention of backing down now that some controllers around the country are being put in jail. Oklahoma controllers have sent a telegram to President Reagan urging the government to go back to the bargaining table and resume negotiations. There is close attention being paid to television reports of what is happening to PATCO members. Today, PATCO was given moral support from 7 other unions, including teachers' unions. All the supporters feeling controllers are receiving a raw deal from the FAA.
If a private sector employer were to have operated in negotiations like the federal government has with PATCO, in that they basically came in and said, here is our offer, our only offer, take it or leave it, there would have been recourse, because that would have been bad faith bargaining, and there would have been recourse through existing federal law. But what the government was in effect saying is that since there is this special obligation and you are public employees and we deny you the right to strike, we can come in and give you any offer we want and you have to take it because you have no recourse. That's not fair.
We will continue. Our families will continue. And now our brothers will continue with us, and we will win. We will win for one reason. Right is might.
The FAA in Oklahoma City says so far 16 striking controllers have received letters of termination. It will be a few days before officials know exactly how many local controllers will be fired.
Of their next shift after the deadline, which was 10 o'clock local time yesterday, to report for work. Because of things like days off that may come in the next 2 days and their various shift reporting times, we will not have the full complement of controllers due back to work until the swing shift on Saturday.
Striking controllers say they didn't ask for the help and support of other unions, but say to them it means others besides controllers think the strike was worth losing their jobs for. Ed Stewart, Action 4.
This reservoir supplies drinking water to Chickasha, Anadarko, and other smaller communities. Citizens Against 2,4-D are violently against Fort Cobb officials putting the chemical in their water, and that's why they filed suit in federal court to stop the application.
We're against the application of 2,4-D because there are numerous health concerns about this material. There's a lot of evidence that it causes birth defects, can produce cancer, can promote cancer, and can cause stillbirths.
Fort Cobb officials don't believe the chemical is harmful, but they do believe the water weed in the reservoir should be destroyed. Fort Cobb Reservoir Board President Jim Frampton says the weed is a hazard.
We've had 3 drownings on the lake this year, 2 of which, at least it was reported in the paper, the milfoil hampered efforts to retrieve the victims very severely.
And Frampton says the weed causes an odor and bad taste in the water. He added that the chemical was used in 1974, 75, and 76, and there were no after effects. Shortly before 8 o'clock this evening, Judge Doherty told Citizens Against 2,4-D and representatives of the Fort Cobb Reservoir that he'll probably reach a decision sometime tomorrow. If he doesn't, he says he'll extend the temporary restraining order. He'll then have 10 days to make the decision. Ben McCain, Action 4 at the Federal Courthouse. The state of Oklahoma is the #2 producer of hard red winter wheat. The Department of Agriculture predicts Oklahoma farmers harvested almost 180 million bushels this year. About 140 million bushels of this crop will be exported. Trade relationships with other countries are extremely important to the state's farmers, and that's why the director of the Oklahoma Wheat Commission reacted favorably to the one-year extension of a U.S.-Soviet grain agreement.
I think that it's a good sign for a climatic condition that we can look at and which we can perhaps hope for a long-term agreement in the months to come.
There is some concern in the agricultural community that the agreement could be used to put a lid on grain sales to Russia, but Kubitschek doesn't feel this will happen.
hopefully a long-term agreement will be reached before this year is out. If that does occur, then the one-year extension will be severed and the new long-term agreement would be effective.
There's a good possibility that will happen. The United States and Soviet Union have agreed to begin a detailed, in-depth examination of a new long-term agreement. Talks between the two countries are expected to begin sometime in the fall. Ben McCain, Action 4.
Jerry Price of the Norman, Oklahoma City Department has been mixing the chemical Malathion and diesel and spraying the mixture in the city several times a week for the past 2 summers. The city doesn't have a problem with Mediterranean fruit flies, but the mixture is also good for killing mosquitoes. Wind studies indicate that a particular area is developing a problem with mosquitoes. For example, after yesterday's rain, Price fires up his gear and heads out to spray. The spraying is usually done in the evening, when temperatures are cooler and traffic is down. Malathion is one of the most effective chemicals for killing insects, and Norman and other areas of Oklahoma have been using it for several years. People are concerned about the effects of Malathion on residents or animals in the areas being sprayed, but Price says that working with the chemical for 2 years has had no ill effects on him except for the distasteful smell, and the city hasn't had enough complaints about the spraying or its effects to justify using a different chemical. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4, in Norman, Oklahoma. State Republicans met today to map out their strategy on issues left unresolved when the state legislature ended their regular session. The most burning issue to the party is congressional redistricting. The democratically controlled legislature passed a plan that left the Republicans crying foul. The 5th District, now represented by Mickey Edwards, would be stretched from Oklahoma City to the Kansas state line. The Republicans call that gerrymandering, and they want to see it changed.
I think there is no one in the executive committee, and probably no one here today, that is prepared to argue that this geopolitical deflowering which the Democrats are trying to foist upon us is a fair and equitable means of drawing boundary lines, so we can start from at least one common point of agreement. This is bad, it is unjust, and if anyone is going to kill the dragon, why, the Republican Party is the closest thing to St. George in the state of Oklahoma.
Another issue the party is discussing is taxes. The Republicans managed to remove the tax from prescription drugs during the session, but they wanted to remove it from groceries as well. Today they will reaffirm their pledge to that cause. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4, at the Republican State Convention.
Oklahoma farmers will tell you time and time again that farming the past few years has been disastrous. Some farmers have made money, but most have either broken even or lost. However, there is some good news for farmers, that is, for farmers who own their own land. Federal Land Bank officials say the price of farmland will triple by 1990. Commissioner of Agriculture Jack Craig says there's a good possibility this will happen.
I think one key word you have to remember is the speculation is what's going to make it triple.
The commissioner says the increase makes established farmers worth more, but it's a problem for young people.
Some of the older, more established farmers have a little bit of investment capital from various savings in the recent oil boom, as I mentioned, and they become competitive with the younger farmers, and this just makes it all that much more tougher to get started.
Experts say it wasn't too long ago that farms were bought strictly on what they would return. But today, the income from the farm isn't always the major factor influencing the price of the land. Ben McCain, Action 4.